Thank you.
Allow me to introduce my mother-in-law, Clara, my wife, Michelle, and my daughter, Sylvia.
So that's a timely topic, as you can see in popular culture, not just at TEDx. So I'm here to tell you why we age and die, and how to live 2 years longer by using something as simple as your cell phone. So I'll talk a little bit about the physics. Since the theme of this TEDx is eternity, forever, I thought I'd talk a little bit about the physics, the poetry, the economics, the biology, and technology of time. Time is at the very heart of our lives. In fact, it's at the heart of this talk, because I'm going to have to try to make it in 13 minutes. In a hypothetical, Borges said, Borges, a very well-known writer in my native Argentina, said that a hypothetical humanity devoid of the senses would be devoid of the concept of space, which we construct from the senses. But in contrast, time exists even in the absence of any external reality. A brain in a box is aware of that some thoughts precede others, and therefore of the concept of time. And so in some sense, time is more fundamental than space itself. And I'd like to quote one of my favorite poets from Uruguay, Mario Benedetti, and excuse my translation from the original Spanish. But part of his poem says something like, I need time. I need that time that others leave abandoned because they have enough to spare or no longer know what to do with a blank time. We sort of wish we had blank time, but there is nothing, there's no store that I know of where we can buy blank time. And so time is intransferable, it's irreplaceable. People seem to think that diamonds are valuable because they're forever. I'd say the opposite. I'd say that our time is now and only now, and that's why time is our most valuable possession, not diamonds. And time is a one-way street. Except for Benjamin Button, all of us go from these beautiful babies. Despite the talk we heard today about them being vilified, I tend to find them quite cute and nice, and we go and convert ourselves into that sort of nasty-looking things. Despite the fact that artificial systems need not age at all, right? The redundant parts and maintenance can make a system last virtually indefinitely with 100% uptime. So I'm here to ask the question, why do we age? Why do we die? We just heard a performance that included as part of its works where we unwind. And I asked myself, do we really? So here's it was my birthday yesterday. Luckily still one of those birthdays under 40. And I got this as a gift from a friend just yesterday. It's a windable toy, and as you can see, it's going to run out of juice very soon. And it just sits there. And I'm going to argue that we're designed to run out of juice, just like that little toy. It's going to sit there idly for the rest of the talk. Now, first, I was just in Hawaii last week, and I took this picture of these are survivors from the USS Arizona who were interred with their shipmates. The USS Arizona was destroyed in the Pearl Harbor bombing, and you can see that obviously happened in the 1940s, and not one of them died until 1982. So every single one of those dead was robbed of at least 39 years of future life. Not one of them died before that. And then all of a sudden, you can see that by 2004, there were like 3 dead, 2005, 4 dead. So all of a sudden, they're all dying in mass. So dying is a very non-random, very coordinated event. In fact, if you look at the chance of death per year, it's an incredible exponential. This is a log plot, so you can see that even in a log plot, this thing goes up linear. So it goes up exponentially to the point that when you get to 100, the probability of dying that year is almost 100%. Incredible, right? I mean, it's that time. It's a machine that's timed to die at 100 years old. Now, why? Well, biologists have a lot of clues about that now. There's a lot of research and a growing body of research done by people from Lenny Guarente at MIT, Corey Barkman at UCSF, Cynthia Kenyon, and others, that if you remove the aging genes of a worm, for example, but this is not the only animal in which it's been shown, it can live twice as long. One simple gene removed, and the worm lives twice as long. So aging is not about the environment harming us. We are programmed to age and die. And removing a gene is something very easy for evolution to do. So if that gene was not removed, it means that program is there for a reason. And so that these animals have evolved to grow old. In other words, that means the genomes of animals with the genes for aging survive more than the genomes of those who don't. So why is that? Evolution requires, as my professor at Harvard used to say, Stephen Jay Gould, there's really 3 things to evolution, not much more. You need variability, you need selection to select the most adapted, and then you need heredity. And you require the right amount of variability, and that's key. Evolution has optimized the genetic distance between generations. Right? So if the distance is too small, then the species fails to adapt because it doesn't adapt quickly enough. That's pretty simple to believe, right? If you didn't have any variation at all, clearly evolution would not work. Clearly there's a minimum amount of variability between generations. And it's pretty clear that if the distance is too large between generations, then most of the progeny will not survive. This is what happened at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Right? When you have too much distance between the genomes of you and your kids, then terrible things happen, because most mutations are not viable, they're lethal. And so you have like stick, like splinter. The apple doesn't fall far from a tree, but it doesn't fall too close either. And that's key. Once you believe that you need some kind of intermediate distance between generations, the rest follows. The optimal genetic distance between generations also varies with the environment. So the happier you are with the environment in which you deal, the less incentive to change your genes for your descendants. And the more the environment has changed since your genes has evolved, and the more problems you have had, the greater the selective pressure for genomic change. Indeed, gametes or eggs accumulate mutations over a lifetime. And so the genetic distance between generations increases with the age of the parents, and this is well known, and that's the reason why people don't have kids when they're too old. But stress is a measure of adaptation too. If stress is an indicator that your genes are having problems, then stress should cause an increase in the intergeneration genetic distance. And indeed, you can see that Monica Lewinsky, somebody aged. So, now, if there is an optimal genetic distance between generations, and if the genetic distance between generations increases with the age of the parents, then mating must occur during a certain age range. And so that's, mating must initially increase and decrease with age. And that indeed happens. Procreation decreases with age as a result of a number of factors: the inability to conceive, which is called menopause, less attractive appearance, as this woman suggests, and loss of libido, and death, eventually. Now, the tricky thing here is if the descendants of the elderly are any less suitable, then why not let natural selection take care of them rather than letting them get older? As we know, it's the interest of the genes, of the selfish genes, that matters, and not what's best for the species at large. If what's best for the species at large would happen, we would have far more females than males, because we would be able to reproduce a lot faster. But we don't, because any particular genome has an incentive to be in equal proportions. That's sort of another story. So the reason is that the majority of animal evolution occurred in closely related clans, where you compete with your brothers or sisters. And so the inferior aptitude of descendants of the elderly may not be noticeable until later in life, but in the meantime they consume resources and thus reduce the probability of survival of their brothers and sisters who carry many of the same genes. And this was bothering me a little bit recently, because this theory predicts that species where siblings don't significantly compete with each other more than with other individuals of the same species should not age. And I hadn't really heard of any species that doesn't age in the animal kingdom. And so just asked myself, well, what about fish? Fish go out, the ocean is huge, and so clearly competition between siblings in the fish world is not much more than with other fish. And so do fish age, right? And remember, this is what the curve looks like for any species that ages, right? Exponential growth of the probability of dying any given year. And I looked for this paper, and this just happened literally yesterday that I found this paper. It's in an obscure journal of fishing science. It's really not aimed for this kind of public, but fish don't age. The mortality of fishing does not go up with age, which is extremely, it's a really counterintuitive prediction. There was a really strong prediction that the theory made, which I thought was against the theory, but it turns out the facts support that. So it turns out that the only way for fish to become sushi, because it's particular what's done with tuna, is for them to have an accident. So in brief, we age to reduce competition for our surviving progeny, which are better suited to produce well-adapted offspring than we are, by being genetically closer to genomes that prove their fitness growing up more recently. Now, this doesn't mean that what's good for our genes is good for us personally, so I'm not against Aubrey's program to eliminate this word rating. But now that we know that our time is limited and why, until we fix that, until Aubrey gets us to that escape velocity, can we at least do something to prolong our useful life here? And so that brings me to just continuing that leap we were seeing for a few more seconds.
Whoa, where's the rest?
Never met the quota.
My units are up from last week.
So is the quota.
Just once, I'd like to wake up with more time on my hand than hours in the day.
How old are you?
28.
I'm 105. But the day comes when you've had enough. If you had as much time as I had, what would you do with it?
Sure as hell wouldn't waste it.
I shouldn't have, as sure as hell, wouldn't waste it. I agree with that. And yet, every day, millions of people waste 2 years of their life overall, their lifetime, standing in line. As I realized when I was standing in a Southern California theme park a few years ago. So I asked myself, first I realized, how big is this problem? And then I found that MIT professor Richard Larson had found that 2 years of our life was spent standing in line. Turns out the cost of queues is huge. 1.3 trillion hours per year, 9% of the average work life, 6 trillion of the GDP lost yearly, and up to 50% of customers for any given business who leave while they wait. So it's a global problem. You can see it in Bolivia. You can see it here. You can see it in Hong Kong. This is Ocean Park when I was here 3 months ago. And this was immigration when I came in last time a couple months ago. It's a plague that's more than 3,000 years old. And so being somebody who likes to do something about things that bug me, I started a company called QLess to eliminate standing in line. That's our explicit mission, is to eliminate waiting in line. And we do it in a pretty simple way with technology, the T in technology. And what we do is we let people join a line remotely from their phone, then roam freely while they wait, get notified predictably on their phone as their turn approaches. They can get as much or as little advance notice as needed in their language and preferred medium. And they can request more time if they're not ready when their turn is ready for them. Pretty easy. You can use it later. And our preliminary report is that we're about to probably over the next week we'll get to the milestone of half a century of standing in line saved for millions of people in more than 100 cities across 4 continents. And it works for Fortune 500 retailers like Rolex, Verizon Wireless. It works for government, where we have a number of customers in the DMVs. It works for universities like Melbourne University, University of Texas. It works for call centers like the leading travel center in Latin America. Hospitality and gaming, Harris Casinos in Las Vegas is using it. Healthcare, urgent care, and banking. So this is where I want to involve you. So in Spanish, the word asistir means to attend. That's what you're all doing today. But in English, the word assist is to help. And that probably means that sometime in the past, before these languages diverged, there was a word that meant both of those. Because attending really means to help, too. And so I want you to help. We're not just looking for developers and salespeople or marketers and PR people to help us spread the word that waiting in line sucks. We are looking for every one of you to eliminate at least one line where you hate standing in line. So your job of this talk is not over until you've gotten somebody who manages or has control over one line where you hate standing in line and where you will spend 2 years of your life if you don't do something about it to get them to call us at waitinginlinesucks.org. Okay, so with that said, thank you very much, Hong Kong, for inviting us here. It's a pleasure to be here. And my email address is alex@qls.com.